Reborn, I took my daughter and changed our fate. People called my life complete. By the time I was 93, there were newspaper clippings in a drawer praising my husband, Daniel Mercer, as the kind of public school teacher every town wished it had. He had spent decades tutoring children for free, paying exam fees for students whose parents could not afford them, delivering groceries to widows, fixing porches for elderly neighbors, and sending money back to his parents long after his younger brother was grown. People called him a good man so often that the phrase stopped sounding like praise and became a fact no one bothered to examine. They called my son, Aaron, successful and dutiful. He had a respectable career, a wife who remembered birthdays, and children who sent Christmas cards. They called me lucky because Daniel never drank, never gambled, and never publicly disgraced me. No one mentioned my daughter. Lucy died when she was 8. For more than 70 years, the image of her small body on the riverbank lived inside me. Her blue-flowered shirt had clung to her thin shoulders. River water dripped from the ends of her dark hair. I remembered kneeling in mud and begging a God I had never asked for much from to give me one impossible thing. He did not. After that day, I put away my sewing machine. I stopped taking alteration work. I stopped arguing about money. I stopped asking why Daniel could find $5 for a student's shoes, but not 20 cents for Lucy's milk. At school, I stopped asking why his mother always got the best roast at Christmas, why his brother's family got our extra ration of heating oil during the winter shortage, why Linda Shaw and her son always seemed to need exactly what my children had been promised. I became quiet because grief had hollowed me into something useful. A quiet wife could work. A quiet wife could clean. A quiet wife could forgive anything because everyone assumed silence meant goodness. On the last night of my first life, Aaron sat beside my bed in the nursing home. His hair was white. His hands trembled as he held mine. "Mom," he whispered, "there's something I should have told you a long time ago." My lungs burned with every breath. I turned my face toward him. He started crying. I had seen my son cry 3 times in his life, when Lucy died, when his father died, and when his own first child was born. "Lucy didn't drown by accident," he said. For one heartbeat, I was 34 again. What? Tyler was there. Uncle Ray's boy. Dad knew. I knew. Grandma knew. We all. The room tilted. I tried to grip his wrist, but my fingers had no strength. "Tell me." "Mom, I'm sorry. I was 12. Dad said if we told you, you'd destroy the family. He said Tyler was just a boy. He said Lucy was already gone and there was no reason to ruin another child's life. Already gone. My little girl had been reduced to a completed tragedy before the river mud had dried on her shoes." Aaron kept talking, but the words dissolved. Under the roar in my ears, I thought of Daniel comforting me after the funeral. "It was an accident, Evelyn. You couldn't have stopped it. Don't torture yourself." I had spent 70 years blaming the wrong person. Myself. My vision dimmed before I could ask how Tyler had caused it, who had found out first, or why my own son had carried the secret into old age. My last thought was not of Daniel. It was not of Aaron. It was Lucy at the kitchen table, 7 years old, breaking her biscuit in half and sliding the larger piece onto her brother's plate because she thought no one was watching. If there is another life, I thought, I will watch. I will see everything. And this time, my daughter will live. I woke to the sound of the local AM station giving the weather. High of 71 today. Chance of showers after 4 o'clock. The voice came from the old brown radio on top of our refrigerator. I opened my eyes. Mustard yellow walls. A ceiling fan with one crooked blade. Daniel's Teacher of the Year mug on the dresser, the gold lettering chipped around the rim. My body moved before my mind did. I ran. The hallway was narrow enough that my shoulders struck the wall. I barely felt it. I reached the small room at the end and shoved open the door. Lucy was asleep. Alive. Her knees were tucked to her stomach beneath a faded pink blanket. One hand rested under her cheek. Her chest rose, fell, rose again. For several seconds, I could not breathe. Then I fell to my knees beside the bed and covered my mouth with both hands. She stirred. Mom. Her eyes opened, large and sleepy. I touched her face. Warm. Did I do something? She asked. No. My voice broke. No, baby. She was 7. Not 8. Not blue-lipped. Not lying beside a river. 7. I pressed my forehead to her hair and cried without sound. Lucy patted my back the way I used to pat hers after nightmares. Mom, are you sick? I whispered. I'm better now. The calendar in the kitchen confirmed it. April 17, 1982. A year before Lucy's death. Daniel was already at school. Aaron sat at the table eating oatmeal. He was 11, skinny but growing fast, his knees all angles beneath his jeans. Lucy sat across from him with a bowl so thin I could see the blue flower painted at the bottom. Aaron's oatmeal had raisins. Lucy's did not. Aaron had a buttered biscuit. Lucy had half a heel of toast. In my first life, I would have explained it without being asked. Boys need more food. Aaron is growing. Lucy has a small appetite. Then I noticed Lucy breaking off a piece of her toast and wrapping it in a napkin. What's that for? I asked. She froze. For later. Are you hungry later? She shook her head too fast. Aaron said, she gives it to me at recess sometimes. I looked at my daughter. Lucy stared at the table. My heart cracked in a new place. All those years I had told myself she was delicate, quiet, easy to feed. No. She had learned early that the family's resources flowed toward boys, elders, and strangers first. She had made herself smaller so she would not cost us anything. I took my biscuit from my plate, cut it open, and spread the last spoonful of blackberry jam across it. Here. Lucy blinked. For me. For you. What about Aaron? He has one. What about you? I'm the grown-up. I can solve my own breakfast. Aaron looked offended for approximately 3 seconds, then went back to eating. Lucy took the biscuit with both hands. Mom, she whispered, this is the whole one. I know. I had to turn toward the sink so she would not see me cry again. After the children left for school, I searched the bedroom. Daniel had always handled his own paycheck. Not because he was controlling, he said, because he was organized. Because teachers had responsibilities. Because money needed to go where it did the most good. I found $14.30 in the inside pocket of his brown sport coat. Payday had been 4 days earlier. He earned $480 a month by then. Our rent was modest. We had no car payment. I bought groceries with coupons. I mended most of our clothes and took alterations at night when Daniel was at faculty meetings. $14.30. I sat on the bed with the money in my hand and finally understood something I should have understood decades earlier. Daniel's generosity had always required somebody else to be deprived. Usually me. Sometimes Lucy. That afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I knew who it would be before I opened it. Linda Shaw stood on the porch with her son, Mason. She had been widowed 3 years earlier. Daniel taught Mason in 7th grade and had decided they were his personal responsibility. Linda gave me a tired smile. "Evelyn, I hate to bother you. Is Daniel home?" "No." "Oh." Her hand tightened around her purse strap. "I just needed to ask him something small. Mason's field trip payment is due and my electric bill was higher than expected. Daniel said if we were ever short, we're short." She blinked. I almost admired how completely the sentence confused her. "I'm sorry. We're short too. Lucy needs new shoes. Aaron has a school fee due. Our pantry is nearly empty." Linda looked past me toward the kitchen as if expecting Daniel's kindness to be sitting on the counter in cash form. "I would pay it back. In my first life, you never did." The words nearly escaped. I swallowed them. "What I mean is, we can't lend money." Mason stared at the porch boards. I did not blame him. He was a child. Linda's face hardened slightly. "Daniel always said education comes first. So does feeding his own children." Before she could answer, Daniel's bicycle rolled into the driveway. He dismounted, saw Linda, and immediately smiled with concern. "Linda, everything all right?" She explained. Daniel reached for his wallet. I said, "Don't." He stopped. "Excuse me. Don't give away another $1 until we have paid our own bills." His ears turned red. "Evelyn, Mason is my student. And Lucy is your daughter. Lower your voice." "No." Linda murmured that she should go. Daniel apologized to her twice before she reached the sidewalk. When she was gone, he turned on me. "What has gotten into you?" I looked at this man the whole town admired. In my first life, I had mistaken his reputation for character. This time, I intended to learn the difference. "From now on," I said, "your paycheck comes home before your charity does." Daniel did not speak to me through dinner. That was one of his favorite punishments. He never shouted if silence would make everyone else uncomfortable enough to surrender. Aaron kept glancing between us. Lucy ate every bite of her chicken stew and asked for seconds. I gave them to her. Daniel noticed. "You'll make her sick. She's hungry. She's always been a light eater." "No. She's always been polite." His spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. That night, I placed a notebook on the kitchen table. On the first page, I wrote our monthly income. On the next lines, rent, utilities, food, school expenses, clothes, medicine, transportation. Then I wrote family support and listed what Daniel had been sending his parents. Then charity and listed what I knew he gave students, church drives, Linda Shaw, and every emergency that had passed through his classroom. The total was obscene. Not because any single gift was large, but because generosity becomes expensive when it is constant and the giver never asks whether the money is his to give. Daniel came in and looked at the notebook. What is this? Our life. He frowned. You've never cared about ledgers. I care now. My parents need help. Your brother lives 10 minutes from them. Ray has kids. We have 2. He doesn't earn what I do. His wife works at the bank. I have no job because the office position your family promised me went to Ray. Daniel stiffened. That was years ago. It was still mine. His family had courted me with 2 promises. Daniel was educated, and the school district had an opening for a secretary's aide that would be mine once we married and I moved into town. 3 weeks after our wedding, Daniel's father decided Ray needed a start and used his connection to put Ray in the job instead. Everyone told me not to embarrass the families over something already done. I was 21. Pregnant within a year. Too proud to go back to my father and admit I had been cheated. So I stayed. Daniel sat across from me. You sound bitter. I am bitter. You were never like this. There it was, the complaint every person makes when the woman who has been easy to use becomes inconvenient. You're right, I said. I used to confuse endurance with virtue. He leaned back. I don't know what you want from me. I want our children fed before your students. I want our daughter wearing shoes without holes before your mother gets money for Ray's groceries. I want you to stop using this household to finance the version of yourself everyone applauds. His face changed. That landed. I help people because it's right. Then help them with what is left after your responsibilities are met. He looked at me as if I had blasphemed. What would people think if I turned away a hungry child? I almost laughed. There it was. People. The invisible audience at our dinner table. From now on, I don't care what people think. I do. I know. The next morning, I went with him to the bank. He protested all the way there. I did not ask his permission. I opened a household account in both our names and had the teller explain automatic deposit options for his salary. Daniel hated every minute of it, but he hated the possibility of a public argument more. I gave him a fixed amount for personal spending. I cut what we sent his parents in half. I stopped all informal loans. I bought Lucy new shoes, red sneakers with white laces. When I put the box on the table, she touched the lid as though it belonged to someone richer. Are these mine? Yes. Brand new. Yes. She looked at me suspiciously. Did somebody die? I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Then I cried. Lucy wrapped her arms around my neck. Mom, you cry a lot now. I have a lot stored up. Does it hurt? Less every time. That evening, she wore the sneakers to bed. I let her. By December, Daniel had begun telling people I was going through something. I learned this from Mrs. Patel at the grocery store. She squeezed my hand between the canned peaches and flour. Daniel says you've been under strain. You know, with 2 children and all. If you need the church women to bring meals, I'm not sick. She looked startled. I'm working. That was another thing Daniel disliked. I had started taking alterations openly. At first, it was hems, school uniforms, broken zippers, sleeves shortened for women who had spent $5 on a blouse and wanted it to last 10 years. I worked after the children slept. Then customers began coming by during the day. Daniel called it embarrassing. "I'm a teacher," he said. "People come to this house and see my wife taking in sewing like we're desperate." "We are not desperate anymore because your wife takes in sewing." He walked away. By Christmas, I had saved $212 in an envelope taped behind the loose panel under the sink. Not a fortune. Freedom rarely begins as a fortune. Sometimes it begins as enough money to buy a bus ticket without asking. Daniel's mother, Mabel, called 3 times the week before Christmas to make sure we were coming to the family farm. "It won't feel right without you," she said. What she meant was that no one else washed dishes properly. In my first life, I had let the Mercer family tell a story about how well they treated me. Mabel told everyone, "Evie is a guest when she comes home. I won't let my daughter-in-law lift a finger." Technically, she did not let me cook the roast. She let me peel potatoes, wash greens, set the table, carry food, clear plates, scrub pans, sweep the kitchen, fold the card tables, and pack leftovers for everyone else. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear. The farmhouse glowed with colored lights. Mabel kissed Daniel, fussed over Aaron, pinched Lucy's cheek, then handed me an apron. "Vegetables are in the sink." Ray already dressed the turkey. I looked at the apron. "No, thank you." She blinked. "I said the vegetables." "I heard you. You always tell people I'm not allowed to work when I visit. I'd hate to make a liar of you." Ray's wife, Donna, stopped cracking pecans. Mabel's smile stiffened. "We're family. Don't be foolish." "I agree. Family should share the work." I took Lucy to the den, sat beside the heater, and helped her read a library book. No one knew what to do with me for the first 15 minutes. Then remarkably, dinner still got cooked. At the table, I watched patterns I had once been too tired to see. The best pieces went first to Mabel and Harold, then to Ray, then to Donna, then to their son, Tyler. Tyler earned a generous serving because he was Daniel's nephew. Lucy waited. Mabel reached for the second turkey leg. "This one's for Donna. She works all week." I cut the serving fork with mine. "No," I said. Everyone looked up. I took the turkey leg and placed it on Lucy's plate. "She's 7. She's growing." Mabel stared at me. "Donna has been working at the bank since 6 o'clock every morning this week, and Lucy has been being a child since 7 o'clock every morning. That's harder than it looks." Tyler laughed. Mabel did not. "Evelyn," she said sharply, "we have a way of doing things in this family." "Yes, I've noticed." Daniel murmured, "Let it go." I turned to him. "Your brother is wearing the winter coat we paid for." Ray stopped chewing. Donna's face went still. "What are you talking about?" Daniel asked. "The money your mother requested in October because the farmhouse furnace needed repair. Ray told Frank at the gas station last week that he used it for a new coat and tires." Mabel's mouth opened. I kept going. "The grocery voucher you sent in November, Donna used it. The heating assistance money, Ray. Your parents receive Social Security. Harold sells hay. Ray and Donna both work. Yet somehow, we are the household expected to go without meat so everyone here can feel supported." "Enough," Harold said. "No. Not enough. That is the problem." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Evelyn, it's Christmas. Then maybe we should try honesty as a holiday tradition. Mabel slapped her palm on the table. You come into my house and insult us after everything we've done for you. I stood. Lucy went still beside me. What have you done for me? Silence. You promised me work when I married your son. You gave it to Ray. My father and brother helped harvest your fields for years because they were afraid you'd treat me badly if they didn't keep peace. Daniel sends you money while I mend socks until midnight, and you still put my daughter last at this table. Daniel grabbed my wrist. Sit down. I pulled free. Don't touch me. The room went silent enough to hear the furnace kick on. I looked at Aaron. Come with me. He glanced at Daniel, then at all the adults watching. I want to stay with Dad. The sentence hurt more than I expected. Not because he chose Daniel for one night, but because for one terrible second I saw the old man beside my deathbed, the son who had kept his sister's secret for a lifetime. I made myself breathe. Okay. Then I took Lucy's hand. Mabel called after us. You walk out now. Don't come crying when people hear what kind of wife you are. I turned at the door. Tell them everything, I said. For once, tell it accurately. The snow had started. Lucy and I walked 2 miles to the highway before a neighbor picked us up. My father opened his front door just after 10. Walter Hayes was 70, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and still capable of making grown men reconsider poor decisions by looking at them in silence. He took one look at my face. Then he looked at Lucy. Who hurt my girl? I had not been anyone's girl in years. That was all it took. I started crying. I told my family everything. Not the future. Not Lucy's death. I told them the truth of the life I had already lived up to that Christmas. The promised job that vanished. The money Daniel sent away. Linda Shaw's endless loans. The food. The labor. The way I had learned to make myself cheap so Daniel could afford to be noble. My brother, Frank, stood up twice while I spoke. His wife, Carol, pulled him back down both times. If you go tonight, you'll get arrested, she said. Worth it. Tomorrow. Hit people in daylight like a Christian. Even through tears, I laughed. My mother, Rose, held Lucy on her lap and fed her warm apple cake. Dad said almost nothing. He smoked one cigarette down to the filter, crushed it into a saucer, and said, You sleeping here tonight? Yes. You leaving him? I hesitated. Not yet. I knew something was coming for Lucy, but I did not know what. In my first life, I had assumed it was a simple accident. If I left Daniel now, I might change the circumstances so completely that the danger came from another direction. I needed to understand the trap before I stepped around it. For now, I'm making rules, I said. Dad nodded. Then tomorrow we make sure he understands them. At 8 o'clock the next morning, my father, Frank, and 3 of my cousins drove to the Mercer farm. I went too. The story traveled through the county before lunch. Dad did not enter the house. He stood on the porch with 6 inches of snow around his boots and called Harold Mercer outside. Harold, I came to ask what law my daughter broke that makes her and her little girl the last people fed in your house. Mabel appeared behind her husband. This is family business. Dad looked around at the neighbors who had discovered urgent reasons to shovel nearby driveways. Good. Families should know their business. He spoke loudly. He reminded everyone of the job the Mercers had promised me. He mentioned exactly how many harvests Frank had helped them bring in without pay. He mentioned the money Daniel sent. Then Frank said, "And while my sister is sewing after midnight, your boy is handing cash to a widow down the street." That spread through the neighbors like fire through dry grass. Daniel turned crimson. "It is not like that." Dad looked at him. "Then you won't mind if people ask what it is like." Daniel minded very much. He cared about reputation the way some men care about oxygen. By the time we left, my father had negotiated something no lawyer could have achieved more efficiently in that era: boundaries enforced by shame. No more free labor from the Hayes family. No more unannounced demands for money. No expectation that I would serve the Mercer household when I visited. And if anyone mistreated Lucy again, there would be no second conversation. Daniel came to my parents' house twice. The first time, he arrived with righteous irritation. "We cannot let every disagreement involve your father." Dad answered through the screen door. "You involved him the day you married his daughter." Daniel left. The second time, he came alone, without a tie, with his shoulders lower. "I'll put my paycheck in the account," he said. "That's one condition." "Evelyn, 3 conditions. Your paycheck comes home. No more money to your parents for 3 years except genuine emergencies we both agree on. No more private support to Linda or anybody else. If you want to be generous, earn extra money and give that away." He looked physically pained. "That makes me sound selfish." "No. It makes you sound married." He exhaled. "And the third?" "Lucy never comes second to your family again." "What about Aaron?" "Neither child comes second." He stared at me for a long time. "You're putting me in an impossible position." "No. I'm removing myself from one." He finally agreed. When Lucy and I returned to town, the house looked the same, but I did not. The first thing I did was move the sewing machine from the storage closet into the front room by the window. Daniel stood in the doorway. "You're really going to do this openly?" "Yes. People will talk." "Let them. You don't care what this does to me." I threaded the needle. "For the first time in our marriage, I care what happens to me." Then I lowered the presser foot. The machine began to run. The sound filled the room like a second heartbeat. The first month, I earned $86. The second, $140. By spring, women were calling from 3 towns away. My specialty became making ordinary clothes look expensive. A department store dress that hung like a sack could become fitted and elegant with 2 darts and a shortened hem. A man's tired suit could look almost new with reshaped shoulders. I learned which mothers wanted sturdy children's clothes with hidden room to let down seams, and which young women wanted fashion they had seen in magazines but could not afford to buy. I listened. Then I made what they actually needed. That was something Daniel had never understood about helping people. He decided what goodness looked like and gave it to them. I asked what they wanted. Lucy loved the workroom. She sat beneath the cutting table with crayons while I sewed, sometimes making tiny dresses for paper dolls from scraps. "Mom, can I have this?" she asked one afternoon, holding a piece of yellow cotton. "Yes." "What should I make?" "Whatever you want." She thought seriously. "A cape. A yellow cape. So people can see me." The answer struck me harder than she knew. Then we'll make it bright. Aaron watched from the doorway. He was old enough to notice that the house had reorganized itself around two facts: his mother worked, and his sister no longer surrendered things automatically. One evening, I served pork chops. I put one on each child's plate. Aaron stared at Lucy's. She gets a whole one. So do you. She never used to. I was wrong before. He considered that. Dad says you're overcompensating. Your father uses long words when he dislikes simple truths. Aaron smiled despite himself. Then his face grew serious. Are you mad at me? I stopped washing lettuce. No. You look at me weird sometimes. Children always notice the wounds adults think they hide. I dried my hands. I'm sorry. For what? For looking at you like you already did something you haven't done. He frowned. That doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't. I crouched so we were eye level. You're 11. You get to be 11. If I'm angry about grown-up things, that's mine to handle. He nodded slowly. Okay. I did not promise that everything between us would be normal. I could not unknow the man he had become in another life. But I also understood something I had failed to understand during those first furious weeks after returning. The boy standing before me had not yet betrayed me. If I punished him for a future that no longer existed, I would become another adult using a child to settle old accounts. So I tried to be fair. Fair was not the same as blind. I watched. I listened. I kept Lucy close as April approached. My fear grew teeth. In my first life, Lucy drowned on April 28, 1983. I knew the date because grief makes calendars sacred. 2 weeks before it, I stopped taking rush work. A week before, I began walking her to school and waiting at the gate in the afternoon. 3 days before, I barely slept. Daniel noticed. You're smothering her. She's 7. She walks 6 blocks. I'll walk them with her. What are you afraid of? Everything, I thought. What I said was, traffic. Strangers. The river. The river is half a mile from school. Good. Then avoiding it should be easy. On April 28, I stayed with Lucy every minute she was not in class. I packed lunch and ate with her on the school steps. I watched recess through the chain-link fence like a lunatic. When the final bell rang, she ran into my arms. Mom, everybody thinks you're weird. I've survived worse. At home, we baked chocolate cake. At 6 o'clock, she sat at the table doing spelling words. At 8, she took a bath. At 9, I tucked her into bed. At midnight, she was still breathing. I sat on the kitchen floor and sobbed into a dish towel. The day had passed. I had changed fate. Or so I thought. For 6 weeks after April 28, I lived as if I had personally defeated death. I laughed more. I took new orders. I agreed to make bridesmaids' dresses for a wedding in Cincinnati. I bought a second-used sewing machine and paid Mrs. Delgado from 2 streets over to help me 3 afternoons a week. Daniel relaxed because I relaxed. Even Aaron stopped watching me as if I might suddenly bolt from the house. Lucy finished 2nd grade and spent the first weeks of summer making paper patterns beside me. On June 19, I went to the farmer's market for pork ribs and strawberries. The day was beautiful. I remember that because for the rest of my life, beauty would never again reassure me. I was standing at a produce stall when pain seized my chest. Not a heart attack. Something colder. A certainty. Lucy. The basket fell from my hands. Tomatoes rolled across the pavement. "Ma'am," the vendor called. I was already running. I do not know how long it took me to reach the river. Later, people said they saw me sprint through 2 red lights, cut across a vacant lot, and climb a wire fence in a skirt. I remember only the river flashing between trees. Then the yellow cape, Lucy's yellow cape, caught on a branch near the bank. Her head disappeared under the water. I jumped. The river was colder than June had any right to be. My shoes filled immediately. My dress pulled at my legs. I kicked free of one shoe, then the other, and swam. Lucy. Her hand broke the surface. I caught it. She was heavier than I remembered from nightmares. Alive children fight water. Dead children do not. That terrible difference gave me hope. I dragged her toward the reeds, got my feet under me, and shoved her onto the muddy bank. She was coughing before I could start rescue breathing. She vomited river water and screamed. I have never heard a sweeter sound. I held her so tightly she cried harder. "Mom. Mom. Mom. I'm here." Tyler left me. I went still. What? Tyler said there were baby turtles. He said I had to stand on the drain pipe to see. I told him it was slippery. He pushed me and laughed. Then I fell. Her teeth chattered. He looked at me. I called him. He ran away. Tyler. Ray's son. Daniel's nephew. In my first life, he had been 12. Old enough to know what drowning looked like. Young enough for the Mercers to call it a mistake. I wrapped Lucy in my wet dress and carried her to the road. A passing driver took us to the clinic. The doctor said she had swallowed water, but her lungs sounded clear. He told me to watch for fever, coughing, unusual sleepiness. I sat on a wooden bench with Lucy pressed against my chest. She kept repeating, "He ran away." Each time, another piece of my first life rearranged itself. After Lucy's death, Tyler changed. Everyone said grief matured him. He became quieter, studied harder, avoided the river, brought me flowers once a year on Lucy's birthday. I had thought he loved her. Maybe he did. Guilt and love are not opposites. The clinic door opened after sunset. Daniel hurried in with Aaron behind him. What happened? His face was pale. Then he saw Lucy alive in my arms, and relief crossed his face. Real relief. He loved her. That made what came next worse. Tyler pushed her, I said. Daniel's expression changed only slightly, but I saw it. Aaron looked at the floor. There it was. Not surprise. Fear. I stood. How long have you known? Daniel stared at me. Known what? Don't. My voice sounded unlike my own. Don't lie to me right now. Aaron's lower lip trembled. Daniel said, Evelyn, let's take Lucy home. We can talk there. No. How long? He rubbed his forehead. Ray called me. Tyler came home hysterical. He said it was an accident. Kids fooling around. The room narrowed to Daniel's mouth moving. You knew, I whispered. He told me 10 minutes before we came here. And your first thought was what? To make sure Lucy was okay. Your second. He hesitated. That was enough. Not to call the police, I said. Daniel glanced at the receptionist. Keep your voice down. I started laughing. I laughed until the receptionist looked frightened. Of course. Even now, even with river water still drying in our daughter's hair, his concern was the volume of my pain. We went home because Lucy needed dry clothes and sleep, not because I had agreed to anything. Daniel tried to keep the conversation calm. That was his gift. He could make cowardice sound reasonable if he lowered his voice enough. Tyler is 12, he said after Lucy was in bed. He panicked. He pushed her. He says they were joking. He left her in the water. He was scared. So was she. Aaron sat at the end of the table with both hands tucked between his knees. I looked at him. What did you know? His eyes filled. Dad told me in the car before you got to the clinic. He nodded. What did he tell you to do? Daniel stood. Enough. You're making this bigger than it is. I stared at him. Our daughter almost died. She didn't. The sentence came too quickly. I saw him realize it after he said it, but it was already in the room between us. She didn't. Therefore, Tyler's future mattered again. Therefore, Ray's family could be protected again. Therefore, my terror could be managed instead of honored. I stood. I want a divorce. Daniel's face emptied. Don't be ridiculous. I have never been more serious. Over a child's accident. Over your first instinct being to protect the child who left our daughter to drown. That is not what happened. Then let's call the sheriff. His hand shot out. No. One word, barely louder than breath. But there it was. Why not? Because it will destroy Ray's family. And Lucy dying would have destroyed mine. He looked away. I suddenly understood how the cover-up had happened in my first life. Maybe Daniel had not planned it before Lucy died. Maybe he had believed the accident was survivable until somebody found her too late. Maybe once she was dead, he had told himself reporting Tyler would not bring her back. Then he had lifted his brother, his aging parents, their only grandson, Aaron, who adored his cousin, and me, already collapsed under grief. Daniel had done what he always did. He calculated suffering and decided mine was the most useful place to put it. How much? I asked. What? How much of my life have you spent that way? He shook his head. You're hysterical. No. Hysterical was me at the river. This is clarity. The next morning, my father arrived with Frank and a lawyer from the county seat. Daniel looked offended. You called your family before speaking to me. I spoke to you. The lawyer's name was Marjorie Kemp. She was in her 40s, divorced, and had the kind of patience that made foolish men talk themselves into corners. She listened to Lucy's account privately. Then she spoke to Daniel. Mr. Mercer, I am obligated to tell you that if a child was intentionally pushed into water and abandoned, that can be reported to law enforcement and child protective services. Daniel's face went gray. It was horseplay. Possibly. That's for investigators to determine. He looked at me. You said you wouldn't destroy the family. I never said that. Mabel and Harold arrived before noon. Ray came with them. Donna stayed home with Tyler. Ray paced our living room. He is 12 years old. 12. Do you want him branded for life? I want my daughter alive for life. She is alive. I turned on him. Yes. Because I happened to feel something was wrong and ran 3 miles like a madwoman. What if I hadn't? No one answered. My father finally spoke. If that girl had died, you'd all be standing here telling Evelyn not to make things worse. Silence. Dad nodded as if their silence were a confession. That's what I thought. We did report the incident. Not because I wanted a 12-year-old in prison, but because I wanted a record. Because I wanted adults outside the Mercer family to know what had happened. The sheriff interviewed Lucy, then Tyler, then other children who had seen Tyler coax Lucy toward the drainage bank. The result was not dramatic. Tyler was referred to juvenile services, ordered into counseling, and barred from unsupervised contact with Lucy. His parents were furious. Mabel cried that I had criminalized a prank. I kept the paperwork. In my first life, the truth died because it had no witness willing to survive the family's anger. In this life, the truth had a file number. 2 weeks later, Daniel signed divorce papers. He did it because the school superintendent had called to ask why there was a rumor that a teacher had pressured his wife not to report an assault on his daughter. He signed because reputation finally outweighed family unity. That, more than anything, told me I was making the right choice. Aaron chose to stay with Daniel. He was 11. The judge considered his school, his routine, and his preference. I did not fight him. It almost killed me, but I did not fight. At the courthouse steps, he looked at me with wet eyes. Are you mad? No. Dad needs me. I know. And Lucy needs you. Yes. He nodded as if we had divided the family into teams that made sense. Maybe to him they did. I kissed his forehead. You can call me anytime. He hugged me quickly. Then he went back to his father. I took Lucy's hand. For the first time since I had married Daniel, the only keys in my purse opened doors that belonged to me. Our new place was a rented bungalow on the edge of town. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen small enough that opening the oven blocked the back door. The roof leaked near the pantry when it rained hard. Lucy loved it. Can I paint my room yellow? The landlord said no. Can I paint cardboard yellow and put it on the wall? Yes. Then it's basically the same thing. She spent the first weekend cutting suns out of construction paper. I put the sewing machine by the front window. Within a month, customers found me. The word had spread about the divorce. Some women came because they needed alterations. Some came because they wanted to see what kind of woman left a respected teacher over a family misunderstanding. I charged both kinds the same. Mrs. Patel arrived with 3 skirts and lowered her voice. I heard what happened at the river. I kept pinning a hem. People talk. They do. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. I looked up. She shrugged. My sister stayed 30 years because everyone said her husband was a wonderful doctor. He was. to everyone except her. That was the beginning of a new kind of education for me. Once I stopped protecting Daniel's image, women began telling me how many men had public virtues financed by private wives. The pastor who never missed a hospital visit but had never changed a diaper. The union leader who fought for fair wages but controlled every dollar his wife spent. The businessman who donated a library wing while his mother lived unpaid in his sister's spare room. Goodness, I learned, could be real and still incomplete. Daniel was not a monster. He had helped children. He had comforted grieving families. He had spent winter evenings tutoring students who would later say he changed their lives. All of that was true. It was also true that he had trained his wife and children to subsidize his goodness without consent. Two truths can stand beside each other. That realization freed me from needing the world to hate him in order to justify leaving. I only needed my own life to be livable. The sewing business grew. I stopped calling it sewing work and started calling it a business before anyone else did. I made appointment cards. I kept receipts. I opened a checking account in my name. When the bank manager asked for Daniel's signature out of habit, I slid the divorce decree across his desk. He went very quiet. Then he opened the account. Lucy started 3rd grade at a different school. She walked there with me every morning. The first rainy day, she froze when water rushed along the gutter. I crouched beside her. We can wait. I'm not scared. You can be. She stared at the water. Tyler said I was a baby because I didn't want to go near the river. Tyler was wrong. He said everybody would laugh. Everybody is not in charge of your life. She looked at me. Who is? You are. I'm helping until you're old enough to do all of it yourself. That became our rule. Not, be brave. Not, be nice. Not, make adults comfortable. Tell the truth. Leave danger. Ask for help. I wish somebody had taught me the same rules when I was 7. The winter of 1983 was hard on Maple Ridge. The auto parts plant cut shifts. 2 machine shops closed. Men who had spent 20 years walking through the same factory gates suddenly stood in unemployment lines pretending they were not frightened. People stopped buying new clothes. At first, I thought my business would collapse. Instead, alterations doubled. Women brought me their old coats and asked if I could make them feel new. Mothers brought children's clothes to be let out, patched, reshaped, handed down. I learned to turn scarcity into design. A damaged wool skirt became a child's jumper. A man's old suit jacket became a fitted women's blazer. Curtain fabric became dramatic holiday dresses. I started sketching original patterns built around the reality that women needed clothes to work in, bend in, wash, repair, and still feel beautiful wearing. Carol, my sister-in-law, said, "You should sell these." I do sell them. No, I mean more than one at a time. That thought kept me awake. I rented a second room behind a beauty salon and hired Mrs. Delgado full-time. Then another seamstress. Then a teenager named Denise who had dropped out of high school after getting pregnant. She had quick hands and an eye for color. I paid her to learn. Daniel heard about it. He showed up one afternoon while I was cutting fabric. "You're employing a 16-year-old dropout. She's 17. That's not the point." "What is the point?" "She needs to go back to school. She is studying for her equivalency diploma at night." He looked surprised. You arranged that. She arranged it. I pay her enough that she can afford the class and childcare. He walked around the cramped workroom. You've become very ambitious. The word sounded like a diagnosis. Yes. I never stopped you from working. I put down my scissors. I had promised myself I would not relitigate the marriage every time he rewrote it, but some lies demand correction. You called my sewing embarrassing. You gave away the job your family promised me. You told me making money was unfeminine when it challenged your control. You didn't lock me in a room, Daniel. That doesn't mean you supported me. He rubbed his jaw. I came to talk about Aaron. That softened me despite myself. How is he? Fine. Angry. At me. At everybody. Aaron had begun getting into fights at school. One boy called Daniel a hypocrite. Another called Tyler a criminal. Aaron punched both. Bring him to me this weekend, I said. He says he doesn't want to come. Then don't force him. Daniel seemed frustrated. You're his mother. And you are his father. We don't get to drag him between us so we can feel chosen. He looked at me for a long time. You've changed. So have you. No, I haven't. That's the problem. Aaron came 2 weeks later. He stood in the doorway of the bungalow, taller than the last time I had seen him. Lucy ran to hug him. He hugged her back awkwardly. At dinner, he barely spoke. After Lucy went to bed, he asked, "Do you hate Dad?" No. Do you hate Grandma? I don't trust her. Do you hate Tyler? I thought about it. No. He stared at me. How can you not? Because hate is expensive. He almost killed Lucy. Yes. And Dad still says you overreacted. Something inside me went very still. What do you think? Aaron's eyes filled. I think I was scared. Of what? That if Tyler got in trouble, Grandma would hate us. Uncle Ray would hate us. Dad said families don't turn on each other. I moved to the chair beside him. Aaron, listen to me. Telling the truth about harm is not turning on a family. Asking someone to face consequences is not betrayal. He swallowed. Dad says you made him choose. No. I told him what I would no longer accept. He chose what mattered more. Aaron started crying. I chose him. You chose the house where you felt safest at 11. Are you mad? No. That time, I meant it more fully. He stayed the weekend. On Sunday, before Daniel picked him up, Aaron stood by my sewing table. Can I come again? Yes. Even if I live with Dad? Yes. He nodded. Healing, I learned, did not always look like reunion. Sometimes it looked like a boy asking permission to return. In 1985, I put my name on clothing for the first time. Hayes and Lucy. Lucy hated it. Why is my name second? Because mine paid for the labels. She considered that fair. The first collection was 12 pieces, 6 dresses, 3 blouses, 2 skirts, 1 cropped jacket. Nothing revolutionary, but the pockets were real. The seams were reinforced. The waists could be adjusted. The colors were brighter than what most small-town stores carried. Women noticed. A buyer from a regional department store placed an order for 60 pieces. I thought I had misunderstood. 60 total. 60 of each style. I sat down. Mrs. Delgado laughed at me for 10 full minutes. We moved into an old upholstery shop with 12 machines. I hired women first because they were the ones who showed up. Some had no degrees. Some had husbands who said work was unnecessary until layoffs made it necessary. Some were single mothers. One was 62 and had sewn parachutes during the war. She could finish a French seam faster than anyone I had ever seen. Daniel's newspaper clipping appeared the same year. Local teacher gives 25 years of service. The article praised his tutoring, his scholarships, his quiet sacrifice. Under the photograph, he was quoted saying, "We are measured by what we give away." I read it twice. Then I folded the paper and used it to protect a table while Lucy painted a school project. We are also measured by what we refuse to take from the people who depend on us, I thought. But that quote would not have fit under the photograph. My father visited the workshop the day our first truck left for Cincinnati. He walked between machines slowly. "You built this?" "With help." He touched one of the labels, Hayes and Lucy. His mouth twitched. "Your mother would have liked that." I swallowed. Dad had been hard on Daniel because he knew what it meant to send a daughter away and trust another family with her life. He had carried guilt for years for not seeing sooner. "Dad, you didn't fail me." He looked at me sharply. I should have asked more questions. So should I. You are the one living it. I'm the one leaving it. He nodded. That was the last serious conversation we had. He died the following spring after a stroke. At his funeral, Mabel Mercer came to me. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said stiffly. "Thank you." She looked at Lucy, now 11, healthy and tall. "Tyler asks about her." Lucy heard. "No," she said. Mabel blinked. Lucy stepped closer to me. "I don't want him to ask about me." I did not correct her tone. Mabel's face hardened. "You're teaching her to hold grudges." "No," I said. "I'm teaching her that forgiveness is not access." Mabel stared at me as if I had spoken a language she disliked. Then she walked away. That evening, Lucy helped me wash casserole dishes people had brought to the house. Was I rude? She asked. No. Grandma Mercer looked mad. She's allowed to be mad. I'm allowed to not see Tyler. Yes. Even when I'm grown up. Yes. She tried to play it carefully. Being grown up sounds better than people make it sound. I smiled. It can be if you practice. Aaron did not become the son from my first life. That was the simplest way to say it. He did not become a different person all at once. There was no dramatic apology, no single conversation where childhood confusion evaporated and he suddenly understood every adult failure around him. He simply grew. He came to my house twice a month, then once a week in high school. He learned to cook because Daniel did not. He learned laundry because he got tired of waiting for his father to remember it. He learned that generosity without planning could leave the refrigerator empty on Thursday. Once, when he was 16, he arrived furious. Dad gave my college application money to one of his students. I looked up from a production invoice. Did he know what it was for? Yes. What did he say? That the other kid's need was immediate and mine could wait. I waited. Aaron dropped into a chair. I hate that sentence. I almost smiled. How immediate is your application? 3 days. I wrote a check. He did not take it immediately. Does this mean I'm choosing you now? No. I mean, Dad says you use money to prove you. Your father is allowed to interpret my check however he wants. The university only cares whether it clears. Aaron laughed. Then he took it. He went to Ohio State instead of the elite university he had imagined as a child. He studied civil engineering. He worked summers. Daniel contributed what he could, though he still gave away enough of his salary to remain constantly short. I paid tuition directly to the university. Not because Aaron had earned some emotional reward, but because he was my son and education had always been one promise I meant to keep. Our relationship stayed uneven. He loved me. I loved him. But I never again emptied myself to prove it. When he was 20, he finally asked about my first life without knowing that was what he was asking. We were eating lunch at a diner near his campus. Mom, if Lucy had died that day, do you think you and Dad would still have divorced? The fork stopped in my hand. Why would you ask that? He looked ashamed. Sometimes I think about what Dad wanted us to do. Keep quiet. Protect Tyler. If she hadn't made it, he stared at the table. I think I would have gone along with Dad. The old nursing home room flashed behind my eyes. White-haired. Trembling hand. Mom, there's something I hid from you my whole life. I breathed slowly. You were a child. That doesn't make it okay. No. He looked up, surprised by the answer. I'm not going to tell you it would have been okay. It would have been a terrible choice. But you were being taught what loyalty meant by the adults you trusted. Would you have forgiven me? I thought of the woman I had been at 93. I don't know. That honesty hurt him. It also respected him. I might have loved you and still never been close to you again. He nodded after a long time. That's fair. No. I thought it was not fair. It was consequence. People confuse those things too often. Hayes and Lucy became too large for its name to remain private. By 1989, we had 84 employees, contracts with regional department stores, and a warehouse outside Dayton. I bought my first new car at 41. Not a luxury car. A blue station wagon with air conditioning and enough room for bolts of fabric. Lucy cried when we drove it home. Why are you crying? I asked. You used to walk everywhere. So? You had holes in your shoes. I bought new shoes. She wiped her face. Like that, we have a car. I understood. Objects are never only objects when you have lived without choice. A car can mean distance. A bank account can mean no one gets to trap you by hiding bus fare. A room can mean you decide who enters. A job can mean your own hunger is not subject to another person's virtue. The idea for the school came from Denise. She had stayed with me, earned her high school equivalency diploma, then taken night classes in business management. One afternoon, she said, "Do you know how many women ask me how I learned sewing well enough to get a real job?" How many? Enough that we could fill a classroom. We started with 12 students in a room behind the factory. Young mothers. Women leaving marriages. Girls aging out of foster care. Women who had never finished high school and had been told their whole lives that skill was something men had and women just knew. We taught sewing, pattern drafting, basic bookkeeping, workplace math, machine maintenance, and later computer-assisted design. I insisted on one class that some board members thought unnecessary: money. Not accounting, personal money. How to open an account. How to read a lease. How interest worked. How to build credit. What documents to keep copies of. What not to sign under pressure. How much leaving costs. I called it practical independence. One donor asked why a vocational school needed to teach women about divorce decrees. Because some of them will need one, I said. The school opened formally in 1991 as the Hayes Women's Career Institute. The newspaper sent a reporter. So did Daniel's parents. Mabel and Harold arrived with a local television crew. They had apparently called themselves. Mabel cried on camera. Our former daughter-in-law has become wealthy and forgotten the elders who helped her. The reporter's eyes widened. I could have had security remove them. Instead, I invited them onto the stage. Mabel did not realize that was a mistake until I handed her a microphone. Mrs. Mercer says I have forgotten what Daniel contributed to his parents, I told the audience. That is true. I forgot the exact numbers. Fortunately, I kept records. Denise brought me a folder. The room went still. I read the amounts Daniel had sent during our marriage. Then I read our household budget from the same years. Then I read the wages I had earned from sewing and the percentage that had fed the children when Daniel's money was elsewhere. I did not insult them. I did not call them parasites. I used arithmetic. Arithmetic was cruel enough. The reporter asked Mabel if Ray, her younger son, had also supported them financially. Mabel stopped crying. Harold said, this was supposed to be about family values. It is, I said. I'm very interested in whose labor family values are built on. The next morning, the headline was not, Abandon Elderly Parents Speak Out. It was, Former Homemaker Builds School for Women Left Without Options. Daniel called me. You humiliated them. They came with cameras. You could have shown grace. I showed receipts. He hung up. Lucy was 17 then. She cut the article out and framed it. I kept it beside the first $5 bill I earned hemming Mrs. Patel's skirt. Tyler Mercer's life did not collapse because I devoted myself to destroying him. For several years, I barely thought about him. That surprised me in the weeks after the river. I had imagined revenge with the obsessive precision of grief. I wanted every future door closed to him. I wanted him to feel helpless and unseen. Then I got busy living. There is nothing more inconvenient to revenge than a full life. I heard things through Aaron. Tyler dropped out of community college. He worked at a warehouse, then a tire shop. He married young. The marriage lasted 2 years. He drank too much. Ray blamed me for putting a criminal label on a child. The juvenile record was sealed. The family scandal had faded. Mostly, Tyler had become his own problem. When Lucy was 22, Tyler came to the factory. Security called my office. There's a man downstairs asking for Miss Mercer. Lucy was home from college for the summer, helping with a teacher training program at the institute. What man? Tyler Mercer. I stood so fast my chair rolled backward. Lucy, sitting across from me, heard the name. No, she said. I'll have him removed. She put down her pen. No. I want to see him. I hated that answer. She sighed. Mom, you taught me I'm in charge of access. Correct. I am now regretting the quality of your education. She smiled faintly. We met him in a conference room with the door open and security outside. Tyler looked older than 27. He held a paper grocery bag in both hands. I brought something. Lucy did not invite him to sit. What? He opened the bag and took out a yellow child's cape. My breath caught. Not the original, that one had been ruined in the river and thrown away years ago. This was handmade. Clumsy. Bright. I remembered it, he said. Lucy's face gave nothing away. I'm sorry. He started crying. I was showing off. I told you there were turtles because I wanted you to follow me. You said you were scared. I called you a baby. You tried to leave. I shoved your shoulder. Lucy's fingers tightened on the table. You fell. I thought you'd stand up. Then you disappeared. I panicked. You ran. Yes. You heard me calling. His face crumpled. Yes. I wanted to throw him out. Lucy asked, why now? Because I got sober. That answer made me pause. My counselor said making amends isn't asking for forgiveness. It's telling the truth without controlling what the other person does with it. He pushed the cape toward her. Lucy did not touch it. I don't want that. He nodded. I understand. I don't forgive you today. He nodded again. I understand. I may never. I know. She looked at him for a long time. But I hope you stay sober. He covered his face. When he left, the cape remained on the table. Lucy stared at it. Do you want me to throw it away? I asked. No. Keep it. No. What do you want? She thought. Donate it to the theater department. They always need costumes. I laughed. Then I cried. Lucy hugged me. Mom, he doesn't get to make the yellow cape sacred. No. He did not. That was the moment I knew she was freer than I had ever been at her age. Daniel's life did not become tragic after our divorce. Not immediately. That would have made the universe feel too tidy. He kept teaching. He kept winning awards. He kept helping students. He also kept giving money away. Without my sewing income covering the gaps, the consequences became visible. He fell behind on utility bills twice. He borrowed from fellow teachers. He stopped replacing clothes until his cuffs frayed. Mabel and Harold continued asking for money. Ray continued accepting help. Linda Shaw returned whenever Mason needed something. Daniel continued saying yes because he did not know who he was if he said no. The school eventually moved him from classroom teaching to curriculum support after a dispute over unofficial loans to students' families. There was no scandal. Just administrative concern about boundaries. He called it punishment for caring too much. I called it something else privately. Aaron tried to help him after college. That was when our son finally learned the difference between loving someone and subsidizing their choices. He paid Daniel's overdue property tax once. 6 months later, Daniel donated nearly the same amount to a former student's medical fundraiser. Aaron came to my office furious. I told him that money was for the house. I know. He said the student's need was greater. I waited. Aaron laughed without humor. You've been waiting 30 years for me to understand this, haven't you? No. You have. I stopped waiting for people to understand me a long time ago. He sank into the chair. Does he love us? Yes. That answer surprised him. Then why does he do this? Because love is not the only thing inside a person. Your father loves being necessary. He loves being seen as generous. He loves the moral clarity of rescuing someone. Family needs are repetitive and boring. They don't applaud. Aaron rubbed his face. That's awful. It's human. Do you ever miss him? No. I did not say it cruelly. That made it more final. In 1997, Harold died. Mabel moved in with Ray. Within a year, she and Donna were fighting so badly that Daniel began paying for a small apartment for his mother. Ray could have afforded it. He did not. Daniel did. When Aaron told me, I said nothing. The bill for sainthood had finally reached the saint. I had no desire to collect it. Lucy became a teacher for a while. I laughed at the irony. My daughter, whose father had built his identity around being the town's beloved educator, chose the same profession for entirely different reasons. Daniel believed teaching made him important. Lucy believed teaching made children visible. She specialized in elementary education and later reading intervention. I like the quiet kids, she told me. They disappear if you don't look twice. I knew why. She met Ben Carter during graduate school. He was an architect with terrible handwriting and a habit of carrying emergency granola bars in every coat pocket. The first time he came to dinner, he asked Lucy what she wanted before choosing the restaurant. I almost approved of him on that basis alone. I did not tell her so. She was not choosing a husband for me. Before their wedding, Lucy sat on my bed in the house I had bought near the factory. Mom, are you scared of marriage? For me? Yes. She smiled. Good. I'd be worried if you weren't. I trust you. You trust Ben. I trust you to leave Ben if he ever becomes someone you shouldn't trust. She went very quiet. Then she leaned over and kissed my cheek. That might be the nicest thing you've ever said about my marriage. At the wedding, Daniel attended with Aaron. We sat on opposite sides of the aisle. When I walked Lucy to the front, some relatives whispered because tradition said a father should do it. Lucy had chosen me. Halfway down the aisle, she squeezed my arm. You okay? I'm trying not to ruin your makeup with my crying. It's waterproof. Smart girl. At the altar, Ben looked at her the way a person looks at something precious without assuming ownership. I cried anyway. The following spring, Lucy gave birth to a daughter, Sophie. When the nurse put the baby in my arms, I nearly dropped her because my knees weakened. She had Lucy's nose. For one impossible second, I saw another baby from my first life. A granddaughter whose face had blurred over 70 years of memory. I kissed Sophie's forehead. "Grandma's got you," I whispered. Lucy, exhausted and smiling from the bed, heard me. "You're going to spoil her." "Probably." "Mom," I said, "probably." We both laughed. That night, I went home alone and stood in the sewing room. The first machine I had bought after leaving Daniel sat in the corner, retired but polished. I placed my hand on it. In my first life, I locked a sewing machine away after Lucy died because I thought work had killed her. In this life, the machine had fed her, educated her, sheltered her, and helped turn grief into structure. The machine had never been the enemy. My shame had been. By 65, I no longer knew the names of everyone who worked for the company. That bothered me. Hayes and Lucy had grown from one sewing machine by a window to 3 production facilities, a design office, a regional distribution center, and licensed lines in stores I had once been nervous to enter. I had spent years telling myself growth was proof that I had escaped. Then one morning, I walked through a factory floor and realized escape could become another trap if you never stopped running. I hired a professional chief operating officer. Several men on the advisory board acted as though I had announced my retirement from breathing. "You built this company," one said. "Exactly. I'd like it to survive me." I kept controlling ownership but stepped away from daily operations. The time I recovered went into the Career Institute. We expanded: sewing, bookkeeping, computer skills, culinary certification, medical office administration, commercial driving, small business law. Then we opened transitional housing for women in training. The first time I toured the apartments, I saw a young mother sitting on a mattress with 2 children eating cereal from paper cups. She stood when I entered. "Mrs. Hayes, I don't know how to thank you." I looked at the children. One boy had taken the larger portion. His little sister was eating carefully from a cup less than half full. My throat closed. "Don't thank me," I said. "Just make sure she gets more cereal." The mother looked down, startled, then laughed. That evening, I went to Lucy's house. Sophie was 9 and sprawled on the floor building a solar system model. Ben was cooking. Lucy sat at the kitchen table grading reading assessments. It was noisy, messy, beautiful. No one was performing goodness. They were simply sharing a life. "Mom, taste this," Ben said, holding out a spoon. "What is it?" "Soup." That answer does not inspire confidence. Lucy laughed. Sophie shouted, "Grandma, Pluto should still be a planet." I took off my coat. This was the future I had crossed a lifetime to reach, not wealth, not revenge. A kitchen where my daughter was alive enough to be annoyed about paperwork. A granddaughter arguing about astronomy. A son-in-law burning soup without anybody calling it sacrifice. At dinner, Sophie asked why the school had my maiden name. "Because I wanted to remember who I was before I was Mrs. Mercer." "Were you different?" "Yes." "Better?" I thought about the young Evelyn Hayes who had been praised for being pretty, useful, patient, and easy to marry. "No. Just unfinished." Sophie nodded as if that made perfect sense. Children are often less confused by complicated truths than adults. Aaron married later than Lucy. His wife, Natalie, was kind, practical, and entirely unimpressed by the Mercer family mythology. The first Christmas she spent with Daniel, he gave away the turkey he had bought because a former student's family had a house fire. Natalie called me the next morning. Your ex-husband is a fascinating person. That is one word. Aaron is furious. That is also a word. She laughed. Aaron and I settled into a relationship that was loving but measured. He called on Sundays. We had dinner several times a year. I attended his wedding and the births of his children. I remembered their birthdays. But he did not have a key to my house. He was not my emergency contact. He did not know every detail of my finances. There are people who believe motherhood requires permanent, unrestricted access to a woman's resources, emotions, and forgiveness. I had believed that too. Then I lived twice. When Aaron was 38, he asked if we could talk privately. We sat in my office after hours. He held a photograph in his hand, one I had never seen. Lucy at 7, Aaron at 11, Tyler between them, all three standing in front of Mabel's farmhouse. I found this in Dad's things. Daniel was still alive then, but had moved into a smaller apartment and given Aaron boxes of old photographs. Aaron ran his thumb over the image. I used to think protecting family meant preventing consequences. I waited. Dad taught me that. Grandma too. Yes. I'm glad you stopped. Before I became like him. The words hit more deeply than he intended. You're not responsible for saving me from becoming anything. He added quickly, I'm not saying that. Good. He smiled sadly. I know we're not close the way you and Lucy are. I did not deny it. I used to resent that. I know. Then I had kids. That sentence has humbled generations. He looked at the photograph again. I realized children notice where adults put their loyalty. I chose Dad because I thought he needed me more. And after a while, I kept choosing him because admitting I'd chosen wrong felt like betraying him. That makes sense. It doesn't excuse it. No. He laughed softly. You're consistent. I worked hard at it. He took a breath. I'm sorry. I had heard apologies before. Daniel had apologized for being misunderstood. Mabel had apologized for hurt feelings. Ray had apologized that things got out of hand. Aaron did not explain himself again. He did not ask me to say it was fine. He simply sat there and let the apology be insufficient. That was why I could accept it. I know, I said. His eyes turned red. Do you forgive me for being 11 and choosing your father? Yes. And for the years after? I don't carry anger about them anymore. That's not exactly forgiveness. No. He nodded. Okay. I reached across the desk and squeezed his hand. Love does not require us to pretend the past did not shape the present. He squeezed back. For the first time, the distance between us felt chosen by both of us rather than imposed by old pain. Sometimes that is the healthiest closeness two people can manage. Daniel developed liver cancer at 72. Aaron told me first. He wants to see you. I was in the Institute library reviewing scholarship applications. Does he need money? Aaron blinked. No. His insurance is good. Then why? He said he wants to apologize. I looked at the stack of applications. One girl had written that she wanted to learn medical billing because it was the first job she had found that could support her children without requiring night shifts. Another wanted automotive certification. A third had left a religious community at 29 and did not know how to use a checking account. My life was full. There was no empty chair labeled Daniel's apology. Still, I went. Not for him. For myself. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and canned peaches. Daniel looked small in the bed. Age had stripped away the posture that used to make classrooms quiet. "Evie," he said. No one had called me that in years. "Daniel." I sat for a while. Neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You were right." "About which thing?" He gave a weak laugh. Still sharp. "I've had practice." His smile faded. "Lucy." "Tyler." I knew what I was doing. I said nothing. Not that day. I didn't know until Ray called. But I knew when he told me that I was already thinking about how to keep it quiet. Yes. I told myself I was protecting everyone. Except her. Except you. Except Aaron, who learned secrecy was love. He closed his eyes. The monitor counted out heartbeats between us. In another life, I almost said. I stopped. There was no need. He continued, "I always thought being a good man meant giving the most away. You gave away things that belonged to other people too. I know that now. Do you?" He opened his eyes. "I gave away your labor. Your peace. The children's money. Aaron's trust. Lucy's safety. That was closer. I wanted people to need me." He whispered, "And you needed me in ways that didn't make me feel heroic." I looked at him for a long time. At 72, he had finally said the sentence I had needed at 35. It did not heal the 37 missing years between them. But truth did not have to heal in order to matter. "I'm sorry," he said. "I believe you. Can you forgive me?" I thought about the river. Then I thought about Lucy and her classroom, teaching a child to sound out a word. I thought about Sophie's science projects. I thought about Aaron at my desk letting an apology remain incomplete. "I don't need to decide that for you," I said. His face crumpled slightly. "That's not. Forgiveness means different things to different people. But I'm not carrying you anymore, Daniel. Not your guilt. Not your reputation. Not your redemption." He stared at the blanket. After a while, he nodded. I peeled an apple with the plastic knife from his lunch tray because his hands shook too much. We talked about the children. Nothing else. When I left, he said, "You built a good life." I paused at the door. I did. He died 4 months later. I attended the funeral. So did hundreds of former students. They told stories about how he had paid for glasses, stayed after school, visited sick parents, and made them believe they were capable of more. I believed every story. I did not stand up to correct them. A person can be someone's miracle and someone else's wound. Both can be true. At 65, I turned Hayes and Lucy over to professional management. At 70, I stopped pretending I enjoyed board meetings. At 75, I finally learned to swim for pleasure. Lucy signed me up for lessons without asking. I threatened to disinherit her. She said, "You already gave most of it to the foundation." Smart mouth. The first lesson was humiliating. The instructor was 23 and called me Miss Evelyn in the careful tone young people use with older women who might break. I hated putting my face in the water. The smell of chlorine became river mud in my nose. My body remembered drowning even though it had never happened to me. By the 4th lesson, I could float. By the 10th, I swam one entire length of the pool. Lucy stood at the end cheering like I had won an Olympic medal. I climbed out and said, "If you tell anyone, I'll deny it." She hugged me, wet and laughing. At 80, I established the Evelyn Hayes Foundation. The first grants went to the Career Institute. The second funded transitional housing. The third created programs for rural girls who needed transportation to community college or trade school. A reporter interviewed me for a magazine profile. She asked, "You've spent your life helping women become independent. Was there a particular moment that inspired you?" I looked through the glass wall of the training center. A young woman was learning to operate an industrial sewing machine. Another practiced a job interview. A third sat with a financial counselor, frowning at a credit report. "Yes," I said. "What was it?" "My daughter was hungry and I hadn't noticed." The reporter seemed disappointed. She had probably expected something more dramatic. But revolutions often begin in bowls of thin oatmeal. At my 90th birthday, both my children came. Aaron brought Natalie, their children, and 3 grandchildren. Lucy brought Ben, Sophie, Sophie's husband, and their new baby. The house was loud enough to make my hearing aids complain. Aaron gave me a fountain pen. "You're the only person I know who still writes checks by hand," he said. "I like evidence." He laughed. Our relationship by then was gentle, courteous, affectionate, not intimate. That was all right. After dinner, he stood near the door. "Mom, take care of yourself." "You too." He hesitated. "I love you." "I love you too." It was true. He left. Lucy came to stand beside me. "He wishes things were different." "I know. Do you sometimes?" She linked her arm through mine. "Me too." We watched his car disappear. Then Sophie's baby cried from the living room. Lucy smiled. "Duty calls." "No," I said. "Love calls. Duty sends invoices." She rolled her eyes. I was still pleased with the line. I lived longer in my second life than I expected. Maybe peace is easier on the heart. Maybe spite is a preservative. At 96, I still walked the garden most mornings with a cane. Lucy was 69 and had retired from teaching. Her hair was silver. Ben had a hearing aid he pretended not to need. Sophie was 41 with a daughter of her own. For generations of women sat under my grape arbor that summer. I watched them argue about whether Sophie's daughter was too young to study abroad. "She's 19, Sophie said. "That's young," Lucy replied. "You went to college at 18. That was different." "How?" "I was more mature." I laughed so hard I coughed. All 3 turned toward me. "Grandma, help," Sophie said. "No. You're the matriarch." I retired from management. Her daughter grinned. "See, great-grandma is on my side. I am on the side of whoever brings me more cake." That settled nothing. It was perfect. Later, when everyone else went inside, Lucy stayed with me. The late sun came through the vines in broken gold. "Mom," she said, "do you ever think about the river?" "Yes. Still. Sometimes." She looked down at her hands. "I remember more than I used to." My chest tightened. "What do you remember?" "The water. Getting caught. You pulling me." She smiled faintly. "Mostly, I remember your face after. You looked angrier than anybody I had ever seen." "I was. I thought you were mad at me." "Oh, Lucy." She squeezed my fingers. "I know better now." We sat quietly. Then she said, "You changed my whole life." "No." She looked at me. "I kept you alive long enough for you to change it yourself. That counts some." She leaned her head against my shoulder the way she had when she was 7. "You know what I'm proudest of?" I asked. "The company?" "No." "The school?" "No." "The foundation?" "No." She lifted her head. "What then?" "You learned to tell me no." She stared. Then she burst out laughing. "Mom, that's ridiculous." "See? Excellent technique." She laughed until tears came. That was how I wanted to remember her, not wet and cold beside a river, not 7 years old in a thin shirt. 69. Alive. Laughing at me under grape leaves. The last morning of my second life arrived quietly. No hospital drama. No sun bending over me with a secret heavy enough to split a century. I was at home. The window was open. Somewhere outside, a lawn-mower started and stopped. Lucy sat beside me reading a mystery novel aloud because my eyes were tired. She had always hated mysteries as a child, too impatient, but age had improved her tolerance for suspense. Sophie came in with tea. Her daughter brought cake I was not supposed to eat. I ate it. At 97, dietary rebellion loses some of its danger. Aaron called from another state. His knees were bad and he could not travel that week. We spoke for 10 minutes. "Mom," he said, "I love you." "I know. I'm sorry I'm not there. You have been here enough." He went quiet. He understood what I meant. Not punishment. Not absolution. Enough. After the call, I slept. When I woke again, evening light had turned the room amber. Lucy was still there. Of course she was. She took my hand. "Mom." You can sleep." I smiled. In my first life, I had died with a question: who killed my daughter? In my second, I had no question left. I knew who had harmed her. I knew who had protected him. I knew who had failed me. More important, I knew those truths were not the center of the life I had built afterward. On the wall across from my bed hung 4 photographs. The first was Lucy at 8, missing a front tooth, wearing a yellow cape. The second was the first Hayes and Lucy factory crew, all 14 of us standing in front of a crooked sign. The third was the first graduating class from the Career Institute. The fourth was a recent family photograph under the grape arbor. I looked at Lucy. Her face blurred at the edges. "Did I do all right?" I asked. She made a broken sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Mom, you did more than all right." No, with you. She leaned closer. You kept me alive. That was the minimum. You let me live. That was different. I understood. Protection can become another prison if fear never loosens its grip. I had not always gotten that right. For years after the river, I had watched Lucy too closely, called too often, imagined danger in every delay. But eventually, I learned that saving a child once does not give a mother ownership of her future. I had saved Lucy from the river. Then slowly, painfully, I had learned to step back from the shore. Good, I whispered. My eyes closed. The old life came once more. Not as pain, but as distance. A little girl on a riverbank. A sewing machine locked away. A woman praised for enduring. Then the images changed. Red sneakers. A yellow cape. A rental house with one key. A label sewn into a dress. A classroom full of women learning how money worked. A daughter walking down an aisle beside me. A granddaughter arguing about Pluto. A swimming pool where at 75 I finally floated without fear. No life is perfect. Mine was not. My son and I never became what we might have been. My marriage had cost me years. My daughter carried a scar no one could see whenever water closed over her head. People I loved had failed me, and I had failed myself before I understood I was allowed not to. But this time, when life handed me one impossible second chance, I did not spend it chasing the approval of a good man. I did not spend it preserving a family that required my daughter to be expendable. I spent it building doors for Lucy, for myself, for women I would never meet. And when death came again, I was not afraid of what anyone might confess after it was too late. There were no secrets left powerful enough to own me. Lucy's hand was warm around mine. The room was quiet. This time, my daughter lived. And so did I.